December, and so much has happened, not only in the last months, but already in the last weeks. As you saw in the news, the whole governance body on climate is very rapidly changing. I guess you all saw this report yesterday, large ruling that pushed Shell to double up its efforts to tackle its emissions. That's on climate in general. On the building industry, it's in Dutch, it's by the Omroep Max, and broadcaster more focused on the elderly or seniors, I have to say. We see that in general, the whole story of that we have to build in wood is really taking up pace in the Netherlands and outside of the Netherlands. We saw this amazing report, I think, beginning this week, published by the World Bank, drawn by our friends from Climate Focus, and who showed some really interesting trends on the field of carbon pricing, which is a large part of our venture as well. There's not a lot of insights in that, but what's the most interesting part is that they really see prices taking up steam quickly, and this market is really growing more mature very fast, and that is a good thing. It should be stepped up to meet Paris agreements, but it is stepping up, and it's already a very, I think, positive thing. And even yesterday, this article was published. Notice that Brussels, the EU, is thinking of a separate trading system for the emissions of both cars and buildings. So also very interesting. So a lot of things are happening. Dynamics are picking up pace. And I think that's very good, because that creates for us a situation that we can imagine something larger. A situation where we take two large societal challenges, the climate crisis on one hand and urbanization on the other hand, and shows us a perspective that we can combine these two very complex and stubborn challenges, combine them towards a system that we start building in bio-based materials, and most importantly in wood. What we will do then is really combine these two challenges towards a solution. I think that is very fine, and I think that's also what binds us today in this call. I think all the participants today are already quite convinced of the perspective on that, and I think we can, by all these dynamics, you can really start imagining it coming true in the coming years. Because what is happening? Technicalities are being overwhelmed in very rapid pace. So that means we have to worry less and less on that. This is a picture of the Skellefteå Kulturhuset. I hope I pronounce that in the right way. In Sweden, where it's very interesting to see. They're really pushing on a very different way of building completely in solid timber, a huge mixed-use building. Aesthetics are being shown. This is a proposal by Effect Architects from Copenhagen, already quite a few years back, but it shows the spatial quality that you can add by building in wood. Adaptability, but also the ways to integrate it with greenery. And societal support is growing in a large way. These are the plans that are currently being made in Paris for the Olympic Village, where they're also really are raising the bar to see if they can build it completely in wood, or at least for a larger part in wood, the parts that they want to add for this event. I think especially on this larger scale, that you see that they are feeling the societal pressure to do it in that way. That's it's very, I think, very optimistic for the story that we have to build in wood. And that means something else. So that means that we're not only speaking about a societal change and an environmental opportunity, but also that it shows that there is really a perspective for business, for a mature way of commercial parties interacting with each other, scaling up businesses, setting up ventures together. And therefore, really time is coming, we think, the era for a much larger scale application of timber in the built environment. So we're very happy to see that. Of course, there's still some barriers that we have to overwin. On the larger term, on the mid-term, on the shorter term. Shorter term is especially wood prices going through the roof the last weeks. Thankfully, together with the prices for steel and concrete, so the competition is still more or less in balance, but there's a lot to be discussed. What we are focusing on specifically with BLOC, collaboration with Laudes, is the part of the market. how can we improve the market situation to create a mature interaction of parties towards larger application of timber. And we see three things that are not complete, that are suboptimal, so to speak. It's still immature market, and that's fine. Things are already transitioning the right way. Things are changing. However, we just cannot afford to wait. The push to speed up construction, at least in the Netherlands, but outside of it as well, is too large to wait for timber to become a completely competitive material. And there are three things we need to do to tackle this. The first thing is to set up a different value chain by making sure that forestry parties, timber handlers, real estate developers, architects, and the whole ecosystem connected to construction, they start working together in a really much better shaped value chain that would really speed up things. That means they have to work on transactions and a different way of interacting with each other, paying each other for the value that they create, and also to, for instance, ensure projects that they have. That also is still not there at the point that we would like to be. And the last thing we need to change is funding possibilities. At this moment, it's quite, you see a lot of issues, quite a large topic. It's really the thing that we focus on as well in our proposal. We see is there's a lot of willingness actually to fund and to invest in wooden buildings, but it's still quite tough, and that's, we cannot just not wait for these three things to become organically better. And that has really become our mission as BLOC to start on that, to focus on that. And we think the first way to do this, to speed up that application of wood, is by monetizing the climate effects of timber and other bio-based materials. And I think it's something we should do, and we think it's also something we are able to do. We can do, and we can do it now. And that means, for instance, trading offset rights, but also to take the whole value of tackling the climate effects. That's something really that would speed up this. And that has been the core of our proposal with ZeroCarbonFund, something we have grown even more confident than in the beginning. What is the basic idea? Well, in the core, this is our proposal. We call it the ZeroCarbonFund, but it's actually much larger than that. It's a whole ecosystem or a market mechanism that we're trying to achieve together with the parties that we work together with, and hopefully as well with you today. And this whole ecosystem is focused on the monetization of these climate effects. That's the real edge to it, the advantage that it has in comparison to the more traditional system of building parties. And it consists of three layers that are most important. First one is the value chain that we already discussed. And I already discussed as well that the problem is that at this point, this ecosystem, this whole value chain, is not working closely enough. That's why we are also very happy to have, for instance, Staatsbosbeheer and Ecotree on board in this endeavor, because they are large forestry parties, and you see that they're already engaging with this new way of interacting with the market, supplying directly to projects, engaging with the end user. I think that's a very good development. We want to strengthen that. We want to strengthen it by proposing a system that they're able to not only supply their wood to the market, but also to supply the CO2 rights that they generate by planting trees and by handling those trees as well. So you have a whole supply value chain that we need to improve. That's already there partly, but we think with this platform we can strengthen that. And that means that we need another transactional model. Instead that the forestry just sells their trees to a timber processing plant and doesn't see anything, then that's that. We need a much more, you could say, developed system in ways that they can interact with. I think that's the biggest advantage in that. We actually have two options there, and for today I'm only showing the more ambitious one because it's more interesting to tell about, but also because it's a more circular one. And this is the one that we're actually not only proposing that they sell the wood, but that there is some party that's also retaining the ownership of the wood making sure that it's being used and also that it's being put to use in other buildings after the building stopped being used. And this is a big advantage because by this way you can guarantee that the wood will never be burnt, because in the end that's the whole key of generating carbon rights, of course, that we ensure that the carbon that's captured in the wood is never going into the atmosphere. The transaction model does two things. It handles the wood to make sure that's applied in a useful way, as I already told you, and it also makes sure that the funds are allocated in the right way, and that the carbon rights that are being generated by the forest are also being handled in the right way and being traded in the right way. And that brings us up to the top level, the funding level. In the end, there are two streams of value that are being generated. One are the buildings itself, being rented, sold, or used in some other way that generates value, the more traditional one. The specific, that's on the top right. The investors are interested in these real estate process. However, this means that they're investing in the end, net positive, net neutral CO2, carbon neutral buildings, so that they're able to invest in a portfolio of carbon neutral buildings. On the top left, you see actually a new party in this system, and that's the one that's engaged with the trading and the handling of those carbon offset rights. And that's the whole one of the edges of this system, because what in the end we're proposing with this is a way, the value chain, buildings are built that actually take up CO2, that are carbon neutral, so that makes that you can have a surplus of rights that you can sell to it. That happens in the top left part. So what are the advantages of that? Well, there are quite a few that we found, but I think the most important one is that forestry and parties and building parties are starting to work together towards a different value chain. That creates a system that we can not only invest in real estate, carbon neutral real estate, but we can also invest in these carbon rights being traded. It's a completely different way of interacting with each other, but it also pushes for a way of spatial development where carbon neutrality is the complete standard, and that timber has the largest competitive advantage. So a natural system, a market mechanism, which takes these climate effects into account, and therefore speeds up application of timber as a CO2 neutral building material. And then, is this possible? This is, of course, the next question. That has been the core of the research that we have done in close collaboration with the Laudes Foundation. And there are 4 things I would like to tell you about that. Because there are 4 preconditions to be able to go towards this system change. The first thing is that we need to create a good system to account for these carbon credits, that it's trustworthy and that the system is closed and functions in the right way. We're very happy to see that a lot of initiatives already taking place in this carbon trading market and the ways that these things are administered. One of the examples we're very happy to see is, for instance, the ONCRA system that's being built by Climate Clean also here today. So that's the first precondition. The second one is that we're not selling CO2 offset rights just in the market and seeing focus on price, because we think that if you are selling this CO2 right, so the right that you say, okay, I'm offsetting my CO2 by making sure a timber building is being put up, you should tell the whole story. You should tell the story about that wooden buildings can be adapted more easily, that they're lighter, that they can be recycled, that they're more pretty, that they can be generated, that they can be added in your vicinity. These are all advantages that we should be taken into account when the carbon offset right as a product, that it should be included in that. The third precondition to make sure the system works is to make sure that there's a suitable structure or a market for these parties to interact with each other in a fair and good way. I think that's quite a challenge already, but I'm thankful to see already the attention that's here today. You all showing up today already shows that there's at least enough attention for that. And we also see that the lobby for building in wood is also becoming quite mature. So the structure is growing. The fourth precondition to start monetizing carbon offset rights in timber buildings is that we need a proof of concept to show that it actually works and to make sure that the market responds to these rights the way that we think it is. And I think in the end, that's really the thing we really want to focus on today. The other three parts, there's already a lot of amazing work being done on today. We really need to start working towards these pilot projects to show that it is possible. And the good news is that we are pushing forward. And so that's really the exciting news we're going to share today. Not only our own building the Dutch mountains, this being shown here today, will become one of the pilot projects, but we're also in very developed talks with the province of South Holland and Brabant and Gelderland to start working on projects and a diversity of projects that show that bio-based materials in timber and construction generates these carbon rights that can be shared, and we can really set up a value chain together. That's what we're going to do and to focus on at least this year. The good news is that you can also interact with that. I'll come back to that later. These regional pilots have a few parts, and it's a long story to go into depth. But the first thing we'll do is to really find out how does such a regional value chain look like. And what I mean with that is where can we get the wood from, and where can we apply it, and how can we handle it as local as possible. This really makes sure that we deliver upon the promise that in the end more forests will be here because we build more houses in wood. So we have to do that regionally as well, as regional as possible at least. The second thing we'll do is set up a regional fund. So make sure, enable both companies and governments in a local ecosystem to invest in real estate that will be developed in their own region. So for instance, for the Dutch mountains, which will be built in Eindhoven, that means that we're going to talk to the parties that we already thought of, and ASML, NXP, these high-tech parties which have unavoidable CO2 emissions at this point, and see if they're really interested to invest in such a fund to build it this way. But also regional governments to show that this is a very strong tool to speed up the application of wood. The third thing we'll do is set up a separate business development track. We already see some pioneers in our own ecosystem. They're very happy to show how their state-of-the-art ways of not only managing forests, handling wood, distributing the systems, modular systems to reuse wood, all these kind of things. We really want to work together in a separate business development track that's actually takes a much more national or even European scale. And the fourth thing is that we see that we already, by doing this project, we have already sort of created a good community of parties that are interested in these climate effects and how you can monetize them. And we really want to maintain this community because we're very happy with it. And it also brings me to my final points. That's how you can join into this program in the next coming months, because we think we'll go on quite a trip. There's a lot to share. If you're interested to also include your own pilot project in an area, that's still possible. We're very happy that we already have 3 tracks or 3 regional pilots in the making. But the more the better. Not only because that's, of course, it's interesting for us to do the research on it, but especially because then we raise much more data on more regional scale, and it makes it much more interesting. The research results much more diverse in that way. If you want to be part of that value chain, make sure that you take up contact, because we still have some places open in the business development track for that. So we're open to parties who think they can contribute to another way of handling timber in this way. If you want to be part of the funding system, you're interested in either the carbon rights or the whole portfolio of carbon neutral buildings, let us know as well. And also if you're interested in a transactional system. So that means, for instance, carbon banking or other ways of making sure these transactions are managed in the right way. That's also. If you just want to stay up to date, I'm also very happy to include you in our LinkedIn group that will open up later this week. That's it for now, for my own story. I had my slides open, so I was not able to see who's already here. But thank you for listening for this part. I'm really happy to hear your responses and to see what we can spark up. But, thank you for now.